Alright, I'm doing a 6-part series entitled A Guide to Switching to Linux Ubuntu Edition that tries to make it easier to migrate from Windows to Linux, or in this case, Windows to Ubuntu. And I just thought it was high time that I do an updated video on how to install Ubuntu for 2021. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to install Ubuntu on a dual boot with Windows. Now, if you just wanted to install pure Ubuntu, the process is extremely similar. The only difference is like what you'd click on under installation type during the Ubuntu install process. But anyway, you are going to need a couple prerequisites before you can begin. So first of all, you're going to need a computer, obviously. And the second thing you're going to need is a flash drive. This flash drive is 32 gigabytes in size. However, a smaller flash drive that you have lying around will do, as long as it's no smaller than 4 gigabytes. Now, you will need preferably a blank flash drive that you're not using, since it will be erased during this process in order to flash the Ubuntu ISO to it. But if you need more flash drives, they're like dirt cheap on Amazon. I believe that these days you could get a 5-pack of 32 gigabyte flash drives for about $20 US, maybe even less. But anyway, once you've got your flash drive, before you download Ubuntu, flash it to a flash drive, and go to install it, you will want to tweak your BIOS settings. Now, I'd say that this is one of the hardest parts of the installation process, but it's actually very easy once you know what you're doing. You're going to want to figure out your computer's BIOS key, which will be something like escape, F2, delete, or whatever, depending on the manufacturer. If you aren't sure, you can always look it up. Now, once you're in the BIOS, you're going to want to disable secure boot, because secure boot is known to not play nicely with Linux or dual boot configurations, and disabling it will actually at least slightly simplify the installation process. Now, there's some people that would just say to mark your bootloader as trusted. I would just disable secure boot, since it doesn't really provide that much security, especially for a Linux system. In fact, if you're running Linux on your system, it actually does more harm than good. Like, even if your Linux system just boots fine, you will have issues running unsigned kernel drivers, which may be needed for applications like VMware. So I would just disable it altogether to avoid any issues. So now the second thing you're going to want to do is make sure that your disk type is set to AHCI. If it's set to RAID, for example, you're going to want to change that to AHCI. And in that case, if you do need to do that, you're going to have to reinstall Windows if you plan to run Windows on a dual boot configuration with Ubuntu. In that case, it's actually going to be much simpler if you reinstall Windows before going and installing Ubuntu. But anyway, unfortunately, I can't really show you exactly how to do this, since this is something where every single computer is going to be different. So unfortunately, you're going to have to look around your BIOS and figure it out yourself. And if you can't find the disk mode option, there's some computer models that hide it, but no worries, you can always look up how to get to it. But anyways, now that we've got that out of the way, let's go install Ubuntu on a dual boot with Windows. Alright, so now first thing you're going to do is open up a web browser and go to ubuntu.com/download/desktop, and I will have that link in the description. And then you're going to go get the LTS download. Don't worry about this release. I would recommend staying away from using short-term intermediate releases and only using LTS releases, because LTS releases are much better supported and they're more stable. But anyway, you're going to go download that, and then once you do, you're going to navigate to balena.io/etcher, and again, I'll have that link in the description. And then go click this little down arrow, and then you're going to want to get the portable version, just to eliminate the extra step of having to install it. Now, I've already downloaded both of those files, and I've got them right on my desktop. So now let's go get our flash drive connected. And now let's go just quickly make sure that there's nothing on this flash drive that you need, because it will be erased. And by the way, the drive that you're using to install Ubuntu should be the only drive connected to your system, just to avoid any confusion about what's the right drive, and then you don't go accidentally erase the wrong drive. But anyway, now we're going to open up Etcher. Alright, now once you're in there, you can select your file from here by clicking Flash from File, but to speed things along, you could also just drag and drop your file in here, and then there we go. Now we've got to select our target flash drive. Since this is the only drive connected to our system, it's not like we have any decision to make here. But anyway, we're going to go select that, and now we click on Flash. And then it's going to need administrator permission, so if user account control prompts you, you're just going to click yes. And then it'll go start the process of creating your Ubuntu install drive. And of course, I'll speed this up. Alright, now for some reason it's saying that the flash failed, but it's probably fine. So now what you're gonna need to do is, if you haven't already, find your computer's boot menu key, which will be something like escape, F12, delete, or whatever, depending on your computer's model. You can easily look this up, just put in your computer's model, then boot menu key. Now on some computers, you will need to enable the boot menu in the BIOS settings, but anyway, once you've got that out of the way, you're gonna reboot your computer, and then you're gonna get ready to press your boot menu key when I tell you to. It's once you see the post screen, if you know what I mean. If you don't, I'm about to show you. So pretty much now press it. Like the very first screen that you see when you boot up, like before it starts to boot into Windows, that's called a post screen. Now if you see Windows start to load, then you've waited too long, or you're not pressing the right key. But anyway, once you're in the boot menu, you're gonna select your Ubuntu install media. Now this is where it helps to have your Ubuntu install media as the only drive plugged into your system, so that way it's not like you have any decision to make here. But anyway, you just click enter. And by the way, that boot menu will look different depending on your computer's model. All right, now here we can just select Ubuntu. And if you were to do nothing, it will just automatically select Ubuntu for you. Now I just want to say that some people would say to change the boot order in the BIOS. If your computer has a dedicated boot menu, which most computers do, I would just use that instead of having to change the boot order temporarily and then go change it back after you're done. It just eliminates an extra step. But anyway, we just let this boot into Ubuntu. Now, this will take longer than it does normally because you're booting Ubuntu from a flash drive, but once you've got it installed, it'll boot much quicker. All right, and then we can just skip this disk check by hitting Control-C. All right, now once you're booted into the Ubuntu installer, you'll get an option to try Ubuntu and install Ubuntu. So now what try Ubuntu does is it'll let you run Ubuntu for testing purposes to allow you to try it out before you actually go and install it. Just beware though that anything you do within the live CD, as it's called, will not be saved and will be lost as soon as you reboot your computer or shut it down. But anyway, we're gonna go ahead and install Ubuntu. And by the way, if you clicked try Ubuntu and you decide you want to install it, there'll be an icon to install Ubuntu on your desktop. And also the reason why my display is acting like this while I'm in the Ubuntu ISO is because I'm doing this in a virtual machine. But if you were doing this on your physical machine, this would normally fill up the screen. But anyway, you can type here to test your keyboard and select your keyboard layout here. And then with this, I would do normal installation here. And then under other options, you're going to check off download updates while installing Ubuntu and install third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware and additional media formats. But anyway, we're going to click continue. And now this is the most important part of the installation. So now in our case, we want to click install Ubuntu alongside Windows Boot Manager. That's what it calls your Windows partition if you have a UEFI BIOS. If you have a legacy BIOS, then it will call it Windows 10 or whatever version of Windows you're on. Now I just want to say that pretty much any computer made from 2014 onward will have a UEFI BIOS. But anyway, if you wanted to remove Windows completely and just have a pure Ubuntu installation, then you would click erase disk and install Ubuntu. But I'd only do this if you're absolutely sure that you're not going to need Windows on your system. If you're a new user, I would just install this on a dual boot because you'll probably still need it to run certain applications, at least until you've found alternatives or you've gotten to the point where you could just run Windows in a VM. But anyway, now we're going to click continue. And now we've got to the point where we can select how big we want each partition to be. Now you can drag this to change the size and just keep in mind how big your Windows partition is. I think for this, I'm going to give it about half and half. But anyway, once you've done that, you're going to click install now. And then you're going to click continue. And by the way, don't worry about the message saying that it's going to format your drive. Your Windows partition will still stay intact. It's not going to format that, so don't worry. It's only initializing the Ubuntu partition. And then you're going to click continue again. And now, once we've started the installation process, which is running in the background, we're going to go select our time zone. We are in the Toronto time zone, and then click continue. And now we're going to go set up our user account. So we're going to put in our name, and then let's call this computer something more meaningful like Ubuntu PC. And then our username is fine. Now in your username, it'll only let you use lowercase letters, numbers, hyphens, and underscores. But anyway, now we're going to pick a password. And by the way, this will force you to have a password for security reasons. And then we're going to use require my password to log in, which is selected automatically. And by the way, the login automatically option is designed for very specific use cases, like for example, if you're running this in a virtual machine and it's already protected by your host system's login. But in most cases, you're gonna choose require my password to log in. And then once you've done that, you're gonna click continue. And then it'll bring you to the installation screen where it'll show you the progress of installing Ubuntu. So then you're just gonna let it go install Ubuntu. And by the way, this process really only takes 10 to 15 minutes, I find. Like, it doesn't take as long as a Windows install, which I'd say usually takes about like 30 minutes or even an hour sometimes. But anyway, I'll speed this up. Alright, and once the installation is complete, you're going to click Restart Now. Alright, then once this pops up, you're going to remove your installation drive, then hit Enter. And now it should bring you to this screen where it allows you to select Ubuntu or Windows. Now, if you do nothing for 10 seconds, it'll automatically boot you into Ubuntu. But anyways, now you can go select either Ubuntu or Windows, and it'll boot up that operating system. So congratulations, you've just created a Linux install drive and installed Linux. As you can see, not all that hard. And that was my updated guide on how to install Ubuntu on a dual boot with Windows. So thanks for watching. If you liked this video, found it was helpful, hit the like button, share this video with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. And remember that if you have any issues with the installation process, or you have any issues that come up when using Linux, don't worry, the Linux community will be more than happy to help you. You can literally just look up your problem and most likely there will be a solution. And in my next video, I'll be going over navigating the Ubuntu desktop. So stay tuned for that.